Welcome to the Devoted Way podcast, all about magic and miracles with me, Sora Schilling. It's time to hone in on your intuition, become artful, respectful, and nuanced with your relationship with energy, and live life based on your design. Your unique blueprint encoded with stardust from the ethereal realm and blood from those that have come before you. You know what to do and how to be, so trust in yourself. Hello and welcome to today's episode. So I am excited to be here today. Number one, if you could see me right now, I've got my heatless curls on with a dress, ready to be here with you. And I kind of want to maybe share my screen so later on you can see what this looks like. Anyway, why are we here today? Well, the other day I was working on a project and I hit the button for it to go live. And something happened when my creation went live. Even though no one was seeing it yet, there was this deep sense of satisfaction. And me as a human design projector, this feeling of immense success. I felt so proud of myself for not only whipping up this creation, but doing it because number one, I desired to be of service. Number two, it was taking content that I'd already created and making sure that there was a tangible, digestible way for my community members to be able to use it because everyone listens, hears, watches, processes different content in different ways. And so therefore, I just absolutely loved it. Now, also, let's get real. The other reason I loved it was brand new. I love technology. I love trying new things. And so there was this newness to it. And my creative sense of soul essence was so excited to try this new thing. Now, granted, whenever I try new things, there is a time where it can get a little bit old or it could feel a little overwhelming, which is why for me, I recognize that I must remember that it is about a bigger vision. And to honor my authority and recognize when I feel a deep yes immediately, when I realize and remember how this supports the greater vision, my wildly audacious vision illuminated, my wavy, then the choices that I make feel really aligned and they are sustainable and they're not shiny object syndromes. So I share this and you might be wondering, what is it? What is the project? Though in the title, it's already given away. So it is a private podcast. So today what I wanted to talk to you about was, what are some of the reasons why you might want to create a private podcast? And then a little bit about how I've structured this private podcast. And I hope that this might help you if you've been considering creating a podcast and wondering whether or not you should make it public or maybe private, or maybe you didn't even realize there was an option, then I'm here to help support you in making possibly an aligned decision based on some of my thoughts and feels around this. Okay. All right. So the first thing is, if you are considering a public podcast, that is the thing that you might already be listening to over and over again. You might have your favorite go-to people that have a podcast that you're listening to on Spotify or on your Apple podcast or on many different apps for those of you who have Androids, right? By the way, I really miss Google's podcast and I miss Stitcher because it was so easy to use both, but neither one are now available. And so I've had to figure out different ways to listen to my favorite podcasts. So that's the things, those are the podcasts that are searchable, that you can search on Google and you can find new podcasts. And that's a way for people to find your podcast. It's open and accessible to the public. Okay. So you may be ready to do that and launch your career as a podcaster. Now, there's also an opportunity to do a private podcast. Now, a private podcast is designed so it's not searchable and it can only be shared either via a specific link or because you've added members to an email. And now this is something that is used for various reasons that I'll talk about. But the only way that you can have really a private podcast is by using certain platforms that will ensure that it is truly private. And so some of the platforms that you use that put your podcast out there and put it to multiple platforms will not be able to help you with a private podcast. Now, I don't know all of them. I'm only using one in particular. And so this is the one that I will be talking about. I have no affiliate with this particular organization. It's just the one that I have used. And so I just wanted to name that. Okay. So with the private podcast, it's not searchable, but there's a couple of things that I love about it. Number one is that I adore the fact that it is an intimate space, knowing that I know the only people that will be listening to my private podcast are those that are part of a particular community. And therefore, they have signed in and said yes to this experience versus my public podcast, which is this here, is for everyone's consumption, which I absolutely love as well, because it's a way for me to support my community members that are out there that aren't part of my paid membership. And also a way for me to help support you as you continue to grow and hear from me and us create a relationship in this way. But the private podcast means that I can be very specific and tailor it with the intent of that actual membership, right? And so I have Cosmically Blissful Business membership. And this is a membership for spiritual business owners, such as coaches, visionaries, creatives, healers, who desire to enter into a very loving, supportive business space where they can really tap into their wildly audacious vision to be illuminated, honor the soul of their business, work in communion with the soul of their business, honor the spiritual energetic component, as well as create their bodies of work so that there's these foundational, amazing pieces to help support them in their business, help them stand out, to grow, all of these amazing things, and to do it in community. So if that is the intent of my Cosmically Blissful Business membership, then all of the content in the private podcast is going to be specifically tailored to that. And so that's what I love about the private podcast. It's very much geared towards this particular community of people. And my public podcast, I can speak a more broader range of things to be supportive. Now, here are a couple of reasons why I absolutely love this and why I would love it for you. Okay. So the first reason why I would love it for you is if you have desired to create a podcast, but you're feeling a bit overwhelmed or angsty around the content generation or how you're going to show up. Are you going to stumble on your words? Will things make sense? And you're in this paralysis around even putting yourself out there, then I would highly suggest doing a private podcast. And the reason being is number one, you can consider it as a testing ground where you can continuously practice your ability to come on live, record your podcast, and put it out there to a smaller group of people. The second reason is that as you're building that confidence, you know exactly who has enrolled in listening to that podcast. And so there's this communal nature because you know exactly who's listening. And that might feel very calming to your nervous system. It could also be a great way to make connections with the people you know who are on this private podcast listening to you, because you can tailor it based on your relationships with them and what it is that they might desire to hear. So you could practice that as well. In addition, it serves as an intimate setting for you to cultivate this relationship and invite them into something else. So possibly another offering. So this could be a paid private podcast. It could be a free private podcast for those on your mailing list. And then you can cultivate that relationship by giving them this amazing content and your words and your stories and just you inside of your private podcast, and then invite them into whatever else it is, one-on-one life coaching with you, or 6 months copywriting sessions with you, or a 3-month membership, or a group program, or come on retreat, whatever it is that you have available based on your incredible medicine. So I love that as a starting point. And or if you are already well-versed and comfortable in front of the mic, as a way to create an intimate connection. So I love that. Okay, so other reasons is when I chose this private podcast specifically for my membership for Cosmically Blissful Business, what I was wondering was, okay, how can I make this membership feel even that much more accessible? And how can I tailor the content specifically to the needs of my community members? Because they themselves will have very particular questions. We will be moving through 90-day challenges to create their bodies of work. They're going to have their own individual project that they desire to bring to life based on their wisdom as their body of work. And so, therefore, how can I encourage them, show up for them, share with them some tips and ideas, and to create this very amazing, loving, nourishing environment? The other is this is a way to create continuous support. So I may not be able to hop on a call with every single member, but I for sure can do a private podcast and support someone's question, concern, or even take, let's say, someone came into Cosmically Blissful business and they said, I've got a new sales page and I'm wondering if you can take a look at it and can you give me some suggestions? I could do a whole on video with the private podcast around setting up time to go through and making suggestions and reasons why I would shift this or for these considerations. And here are some best practices and here are some tips, take it or leave it. What a great podcast to listen to when you are driving or are running some errands, right? And so I know that when I'm in the car, I try to digest as much audio as I possibly can. And so this is a great way. And sometimes you might want to go back to something, but inside of a course or membership portal, you have to like find it. But in a podcast, it's all listed and it's searchable and you might be able to just easily go back and listen to something if you've already viewed it so that you can remember or gain additional inspiration. Okay. The other reason is what I hope that this is a test. I'm testing this out, this theory that to have a private podcast might also create a sense of not only continuous support, but actual engagement and retention. And what I mean by that is if inside of our community area, we are talking about the private podcast, or we're saying, hey, are you listening to the meditation of meeting the soul of your business every day? It's on your private podcast and you can save it and store it so you can go to it every single day. How's it going? What's been happening? Or have you done that devoted breathe breathwork session around renewal? How are you feeling about that? Or if I'm not the one engaging with the prompt, but let's say a community member shows up and enters in and says, I've been doing the dragon's egg meditation every day, and I cannot tell you the profound shifts that have happened. Or, hey, everyone, have you listened to the fullest expression of yourself meditation? And have you been working with that? Because these are the things that happened to me, 1, 2, and 3. I really suggest you do it, or tell me if you've been having some amazing energetic shifts, right? So there's this common place where they can listen and then share what's been going on with them. And there are things that people can go back to over and over again. So I love that. So I'm going to test it and see if my feels around community engagement and retention and feeling even deeper in each other's commitment to one another will happen based on having a private podcast and based on the vision of the content that I want to create or reuse and share. All right. So now that I shared a little bit more about that, you might be wondering, and I'm going to go a little bit further into the private podcast and kind of the delivery method, but I want to use an example, right? So often it's nice to have a big picture as to, okay, these are great reasons why, but you might be really curious as to how I even go about using this. And so I'm going to use the example of my Cosmically Blissful business because that's where the private podcast is. So let me give you a little rundown around what Cosmically Blissful business actually is. And then I would tell you about how I'm using the private podcast and what are the specific things that will be inside of the podcast so that it could help you generate some ideas as well. Okay. So the Cosmically Blissful business podcast is a membership, meaning that any person could enter in and leave at any time. There is no like X month or year-long commitment or anything of the sort. You can come in, you can satiate yourself, and then you can go on out when it feels true for you. My hope is that you enjoy yourself so much and you see and sense the value of your investment because you're investing in you and your business, alongside me and your community members, that you find that you enjoy the space tremendously. So that's my hope. All right. So what is beautiful and different about Cosmically Blissful Business is I am looking at this membership in 90-day cycle. So you can come in for 1 month and leave for sure. But in these 90-day cycles, I'm looking at it from a seasonal perspective and from an energetic perspective. We often get caught in the minute details of day-to-day tasks, and we forget the larger vision. And so our foundation here inside of Cosmically Blissful are the following. Number one is holding in the prayer field your wildly audacious vision illuminated, your wavy. When you have this bigger vision, whether you hit it or not, because it's so inspiring and aspirational and it just lights you up and it's so juicy, every time you hear your wavy, every time you speak your wavy, there's this thing that happens to your body. There's this zing, this aliveness. It's not a yearning. It's not a wish. It's not a desperate tug. It is a full body yes that just coats your system. And so that's what we focus on first. And so for 90 days, you have that wildly audacious vision illuminated. That is your guiding compass. So every action you take, every thought, every new creation, every dream, every new thing that you learn is dedicated towards that wavy. So you're not feeling off track or looking at shiny objects and going off in distances, right? There's this really nice alignment that happens. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second is we look at honoring not only your wavy, your wildly audacious vision illuminated, but also your fullest expression of yourself. So in your day-to-day, there's concerns, there are fears, there's your mind telling you you can't, or it's never going to happen, or whatever it is. There are core wounds that have created this sense of awareness in you that might cause you to feel stuck in certain areas in your life and your business. And so when we can bring forth the fullest expression of you, which sometimes we might say is your futures, but to be honest, it is a self of you in the multi-universe. You are this because it's innately deeply in you. It's simply all of the different life experiences that have caused you to hesitate. But the truest expression of you lies within you. But sometimes it's easier when you see it outside of yourself first and you're like, that is me. And then you begin to meet it together and you weave that in and you merge together. And so we work with the fullest expression of you from a very visceral, sensory, energetic, imaginative standpoint. And we bring that in so you can begin to feel it within you, feel it in your body. And so from that place, we ask you to make choices. We ask you to speak from that place. We ask you to consider, what do you need to do at this moment to be that, right? And so that might mean you may do certain things, you may make certain choices that are slightly different, or your thoughts will be slightly different, or how you dress might be slightly different. There are certain things that might shift. It doesn't mean that everything shifts. Your fullest expression of self, whether it's now or 2 years from now, doesn't mean that you change 100%. The fullest expression of you is the core soul's essence of you. So much of that should not shift, right? Your life based on you having abundance, including, let's say, abundance in money, doesn't mean that everything needs to change. Okay, so we work with that. And then lastly, we work with the soul of your business, the energy of your business. This frequency is alive and has their own thoughts and feelings and vision. And often what we have done is we have berated our business, we have bullied our business, we have taken control, we have created hierarchy, and we have been not so great in relationship with our business. And so this is a way to reconcile that and create this harmonious relationship so that we can listen to the advice and the counsel of your business and not always feel like we know best, that we have to do X, Y, and Z, because many times that comes from external feedback rather than internal support guiding us, as well as the energy of our business. And so if we can create that intimate relationship, we're golden. So we use those three as this amazing partnership to then help us really bring forth our body of work. Why do I focus on your body of work? Because that's how you leave your legacy. That's how you stand apart from others. That's how people are going to feel you, feel your authenticity, desire to be in your space and be with you, learn from you, be coached by you, be in your healing space so that they can heal themselves. All of this happens because they will understand you, your wisdom, your way of navigating the world, and feel you much more so than ever before. So that's why I believe so strongly in someone's bodies of work. Okay, so that's kind of the overall arcing. Now, how do the members engage? Well, there's live events that occur, but in addition, every 90 days, there's some sort of project, right? And so, for example, this next 90 days, the project is working and creating your own healing archetypes. And your healing archetypes is part of the foundation of your body of work, because through that, there's so much that can happen. And so, and every 90 days it shifts. Within that, you have your own private project. So for example, let's say you want to create your private podcast or a public podcast. Awesome. Within those 90 days, we're here to cheer you on. We're here to give you suggestions. We're here to reflect back your greatness and your medicine. We're here to be your guest. We're here to share your work. Like, this is where we help you as you help yourself. Okay. So if that's the case, and that's what happened inside of Cosmically Blissful Business, now that you have an overview of what's inside of that membership, then let's talk about what it is that I place into the Cosmically Blissful private podcast. Okay, so the first thing I start thinking about is when I think about the members inside of this group, I'm wondering, how are they going to engage? Now, if I think about my devoted healing archetypes, right? So in the space, everyone's going to create their own. But if I consider mine, let's think about my four. They're compassionate healer, enchanted weaver, prolific alchemist, and sovereign warrior. So if I think about my compassionate healer, they're going to be there for the group experience, engaging and helping to nurture the environment through comments and showing up. And so they're the folks who are going to listen to the podcast. They're going to drop in, and then they're going to engage and say, who's listened to the private podcast about? What are your feels around it? And they're going to desire to hear from other folks and engage in that way. Our enchanted weavers inside of the membership are going to love to find those intimate one-on-one connection moments and support each other in an intimate nature and call for spiritual depth. So they're going to love the fact that there's going to be spiritual podcasts where they can dive into their own intimate work for themselves. They're also going to love to reach out to individual members and speak to them and even go through, let's say, a breath work together, or ask them what their thoughts are around this particular podcast, and have it be a really easeful way to start building connection, relationships, and loving friendships with one another. All right, so the prolific alchemist, they love celebrating others and will bring manifestations to life, reminding folks that magic is real. And so they're the ones who are going to listen to the podcast, come in and say, whoa, I have this profound new understanding around X, Y, and Z. I've come to realize this. And they're going to share their wisdom and their thoughts and feelings. And they're going to blow the minds and socks and hearts open of our community members by sharing the wisdom and this prolific understanding that has come about. They're also going to celebrate. They're going to celebrate me. They're going to be like, Sora's podcast around this was amazing, which really satiates, and I just feel loved. They're also going to celebrate our guests who come on the podcast. They're going to celebrate everyone's wildly audacious vision illuminated. And so that's what they're going to be doing. Now, our sovereign warriors in the membership will feed the prayer field, and they're going to have this incredible faith in themselves and with everyone else. They're going to enthusiastically move through all the content, sharing their experiences, and help you to improve your offerings and just improve in you being in alignment with yourself. And so this is where they will use the podcast to come back into alignment. They're going to listen to the podcast and notice when there are folks not quite in the rhythm of Cosmically Blissful. They're the ones that are going to reach out to me and say, Sora, may I make a suggestion? We're feeling a little lost, or we're not getting into that mojo of like the vibes of Cosmically Blissful. We need a reset, or have you considered doing this to improve the podcast? And they have utter faith in not just themselves, but utter faith in the community, utter faith in the vision of Cosmically Blissful, and utter faith in me. But they'd like to make sure that I'm also in alignment and in integrity, right? Okay, so based on that, when I think about creating various components to the private podcast, right? Because humans dive into content in different ways, there's a couple things that I consider. So number one, from a holistic standpoint of my membership, obviously I will have video, I will have audio, I'll have captions, I'll have transcriptions, I'll have workbooks, I'll have events that happen in real time. I will also have asynchronously events that happen where people can kind of digest information on their own time. So that kind of covers how people consume content. But in addition, what I'm looking at is the content inside of the podcast. How do I satiate diverse learners, the needs of all different archetypal energies of my members to ensure that they're feeling really held? So this is what I came up with based on knowing my community members using my healing archetypes, which is what my folks inside of Cosmically Blissful business, they're known as Cosmos, they'll be creating for themselves, right? So for my archetypes with compassionate healers, what I know is that if I create meditations and breath work experiences on the private pod, they're going to love it. They're going to love it. Okay. For enchanted weavers, I know they're going to really, really love having guest speakers because they're going to feel like there's this intimate connection and conversation that's happening. And they're going to love prayers. When we think about prayers, we're thinking about blessings and intentions. And they're going to love listening to prayers and igniting their own. They're going to love listening to guest speakers, including their community members that are on the pod as guests. Now, our prolific alchemists are going to love when I answer questions. They have a whole slew of questions. And if I come on the pod and I do a 5-minute, a 10-minute, a 20-minute answering of a question, they're going to feel so satiated. In addition, they're going to love Get Energy Coach sessions. These are self-guided energy coaching sessions that one can do that I provide. And so when I know that I am noticing that my community members are stuck with this energetic tension, let's say, that I can do a self-guided Get Energy Coach session that they can listen to. My prolific alchemists are going to love that, right? All right, so what about for my sovereign warriors? My sovereign warriors are going to desire to have spiritual musings. They're going to want to know that I am also opening myself up and that we can meet each other in this sacred space and there's no hierarchy. So they're going to want to hear personal stories. They're going to want to know what's happening with me. What's my own business challenge right now? What happened when I did X, Y, and Z? They're going to want to know the behind the scenes and the personal stories around me. They're also going to desire to feel as if they are being included in the conversations. And so if I'm having certain thoughts or certain feelings, I might pose them up and then say, what are your thoughts around it, right? I'm asking for counsel with my private members inside of the Cosmically Blissful business community. And so I can use that to then create a podcast to even support me, not just support them. And then inside of the community, they can share with me what their thoughts are, their reflections, the possible solutions, the ideas, things like that. Okay, so that's how I think about the private podcast. I create based on knowing my own healing archetypes. Could you imagine for yourself? You have your own healing archetypes that are not generic, based on your community and based on you, because all 4 archetypes are me. And then you create and generate content based on your wisdom, based on honoring each of the archetypes. You offer based on each of the archetypes. It becomes this holistic experience in everything that you do. Okay. Now, what I hope happens here is that number one, all of my members feels like their needs are being met and satiated in some way. Number two, there's one place they can go to satiate their desire to listen to certain things. Now, in addition, it means there's one place where some of the content in Cosmically Blissful Business is used over and over again, like your wavy, or meeting the fullest expression of you, or communing with the soul of your business. So, or doing a breath work or a meditation, right? So, or a prayer. So these things are a daily act of devotion, right? That's why we're called Devoted Way. It's also a beautiful place of doing some spiritual payment, giving forward by doing some of the work of your spiritual work in order to feel clear as a vessel to do some of your business work, including the tangible things, your actions. And so they can create a private playlist, have a go-to every day as part of their daily ritual, and then shift that based on the new pods that are rolled out. Lastly, it's a great place for orientation. So if you have a new membership or you are trying to orient your people into understanding where to go for what or what your offerings are, having a private podcast is super helpful because they know, okay, exactly what are you about? What are your offerings? Why did you choose that? What was your past live experience that got you to the place that you are now? They get to learn more about you, your journey, your offerings, and why you offer them. And that could be the orientation for your people in regards to inside of your private podcast. Okay. So those are the reasons. The benefits are that it provides a lot of value. You have an intimate group that you know. You get to invite them to be on a journey, and you can be very specific around the content that you provide, knowing who your audience members are. It is a beautiful thing, whether you do a private podcast or you end up doing a public podcast. So that's it. That's why I love private podcasts. I hope this gives you some really valuable information, some things to consider and feel for your next steps around what you might want to offer as part of your project, because your private podcast is a body of work. And it is filled with your wisdom, your magic, and your medicine. And of course, I would feel really called to also invite you to Cosmically Blissful Business, because if you do desire to create a private podcast or a public one, this is a place where you can go ahead and do it and not get stuck, because we can help you. I have a public podcast. I now have a private one. I can help you with some of this. And there are many folks inside of our container that have a podcast. And so they too can help support you in bringing this vision to life, because you never know. Maybe your wildly audacious vision illuminated for the next 90 days is around creating your own podcast. Okay, enjoy. I hope this is supportive, and I shall see you or speak to you next time. It is a blessing to serve you. My deepest desire is to bring nourishment to your soul, activate and enliven your inner landscape, and find inspiration through the sacred stories of others and myself, so we remember we are collectively woven. If you would like to learn more about mysticism, spiritual devotion, magic and intuition, sacred leadership, business practices, and devoted energy coaching, please make sure you subscribe to Devoted Way podcast. As I continue to serve, may I humbly ask for a sacred exchange. I would be so appreciative if you would write a love note, otherwise known as a review. Share the episode with your friends and community members, and engage with me on Instagram at Devoted Way. If you have any questions you desire to be answered on Devoted Way podcast, please head over to devotedway.com and send me an email. Stay sacred and discover your path and join the Devoted Way. May magic and miracles occur in your life every day as you co-create a synchronistic new world with the Great Mother. Until next time, this is Sora Schilling.